Tonight on Steelers Talk, a former Steelers wide receiver target now hits the waiver wire late into the season. Why I think the Steelers could be interested in this wide receiver yet again here as we approach the home stretch. Then we'll get into my film takeaways for Week 13. Lots to talk about on offense and defense after yesterday's thrashing against the Buffalo Bills. And then we got the latest Steelers injury updates here on a Monday. Lots to talk about here on Steelers Talk, so buckle in. It's probably going to be a little bit of a longer one here, guys. But if you want to give me a follow on X, guys, I actually put all of my film analysis from yesterday's game up on my X account. We're not allowed to show actual film here on the YouTube channel because it's YouTube policy, but we can put it on my X account so you guys can check that out. I got all my thoughts on everything that we're going to talk about during the film takeaways portion of today's show. You can see the actual video, evidence and the examples that I'm going to be talking about on today's show on my X account. So if you want my film analysis on the Pittsburgh Steelers every single week, you find it on my X account. You find it at Jack_Sperry on X. Greatly appreciate all of your guys' support. So now Adam Thielen, the former Carolina Panther, now Minnesota Viking wide receiver, has been waived by the Vikings, apparently to give him a chance to play for a playoff competitor heading into the home stretch of what is Adam Thielen's final NFL season. He is going to be retiring at the end of this year. The Vikings are out of the mix, and Thielen is now looking for a new home to try and play a little bit more. He's not playing a whole lot inside the Vikings offense right now, and he wants a place where he can play and a team that is looking to potentially make a playoff run towards the end of the season. Not a lot of teams that fit that bill. Usually the teams that are in the playoff hunt usually have a pretty good set of receivers already. The Steelers are one of the only teams in the league that's in the playoff hunt that doesn't have a stacked wide receiver room. So that really is the question. Should the Pittsburgh Steelers bring Adam Thielen in to pair with Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, and the rest of this Steelers offense? Well, Thielen is 35 years old. He's in the final year of his NFL career, according to himself. And something to keep in mind here, guys, is that Pittsburgh did show interest in trading for then a 34-year-old Adam Thielen at the trade deadline last year when he was still with the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers reportedly wanted like a fourth-round pick. They wanted a really high draft pick for Thielen's services for pretty much a one-year rental. The Steelers didn't want to pay that high of a price tag, so a deal for Thielen never ended up getting done. But Thielen is a big slot technician, so he's a bigger body guy, good route runner, good run blocker too. With decent hands, in fact, pretty darn good hands, and he honestly just didn't play a whole lot in Minnesota this year. He has, continued to lose a step. He's never been the most athletic guy in the world, and as that athleticism begins to fade, now that he's 35 years old, he's become a less and less effective player. And in that Minnesota Vikings offense, since Jordan Addison's come back, his role in this Vikings offense has really gone away. They've really gone more towards Jalen Naylor as their number 3 receiver in Minnesota. So Thielen's only had 18 targets the entire season. He only has 8 catches for 69 yards and no touchdowns. So he certainly hasn't been productive this year, but he's looking for a place where he can have a role on a playoff contending team. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are one of really the only teams, like I mentioned, that's in the playoff hunt right now that was looking for wide receiver help at the trade deadline and wasn't able to get any of the receivers that they targeted. They tried to get Rashid Shaheed. He ended up going to the Seattle Seahawks. They tried to get Jacoby Myers. He ended up going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. They tried to get Jalen Waddle. He ended up staying put in Miami, and they ended up, being stuck with the receivers that they currently have. And now Adam Thielen is available on waivers, and if he clears waivers, he could be got in just pure free agency when he clears waivers here early in the week. But it's also worth noting here, guys, that Adam Thielen is a big Aaron Rodgers guy. These guys are good friends. They were competitors and rivals for a long time when Thielen, of course, played for the Vikings for all those years and Rodgers played in Green Bay. They developed a relationship over those years and a good friendship. So, this is certainly something where Rodgers, kind of like the MVS situation, where he could call up Thielen and say, hey, man, you want to go, spend the final days of your career with me throwing you passes? And, with the Steelers right in the thick of things in the AFC North divisional race right now, currently tied at the top of this division. Certainly the Steelers count as a team that is still in the playoff hunt, so I do think that the Steelers would meet Thielen's criteria as a team that is in the playoff hunt, and B, a team that he could potentially get a starting role with because he really brings something that, the Steelers don't really have in their wide receiver room right now, which is a bigger body, route running, hands type catching, type of receiver. You got some smaller guys and Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin Panther and some speedier guys. But Thielen is the type of pros pro that Rodgers might be able to trust right away. So this makes some sense there in terms of fit, in my opinion. Now, some other landing spots that Thielen could potentially look at. The Buffalo Bills were another team that was kind of looking at the wide receiver market at the trade deadline, ended up not doing anything. They brought in Brandon Cooks last week, so we'll see if they're interested in Thielen. The New England Patriots are also a team that could maybe think about it, but honestly, I think the Patriots are probably good with what they have. San Francisco is a team that's had a number of wide receiver injuries. Could they think about bringing in Thielen? It's a possibility. And then the Denver Broncos, they brought in Elijah Moore, another free agent wide receiver, for a visit today. So we'll see if Denver extends that interest out towards Adam Thielen throughout the week. But what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. Should the Pittsburgh Steelers bring in Adam Thielen for the rest of this season? I don't think it would necessarily make it much of a difference. I don't think it's like a game-changing move, but it's kind of one of those things where it might be a why-not situation here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Type S if you would sign Thielen, or type P if you would pass on Thielen. In just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And while I tell you about our sponsor today, type S for sign or P for pass when it comes to Adam Thielen. Now, before we get into our film takeaways from yesterday's beatdown against the Buffalo Bills, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And it is officially the holiday season, guys. And in my opinion, this is the best time of the year for watching sports. Bowl games, basketball matchups, playoff pushes, it's all happening all at once. And while all that action is going on, there is one place where it feels good to be right, and that is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is super simple to play. Just pick more than or less than on at least 2 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you could cash in. My favorite feature about Prize Picks is how you play is up to you. If you want a little bit more flexibility, you can choose the flex play where you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you're feeling really strong about a particular lineup and want bigger payouts, you can go for the power play. No matter how you play, though, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test and make some money. That is, if you know ball. So for Monday Night Football tonight, I'm taking the more on passing yards for Drake May, the more on Jackson Dart rushing and receiving touchdowns. I'm taking the more on touchdowns for Stephon Diggs as well. So if you guys want to get in on the fun here for the rest of the football season here, download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Now, let's get into this film, guys, and let's get into my takeaway. Starting with the offense, this was Arthur Smith's probably maybe his worst game as an offensive play caller for the Pittsburgh Steelers in his 2 years here with the team. It just wasn't well sequenced, in my opinion. There were some really questionable decisions, calling some run plays in some very questionable spots, passing the ball a lot early in the game when they should have been trying to establish the run. I just didn't think that it was a particularly good game. There wasn't a lot of downfield concepts and passing concepts that I thought really worked. The spacing was off on a lot of the concepts that they did try. It just wasn't a good week, in my opinion, from a play calling perspective. I thought he called one of the best games he has ever had as the OC of the Pittsburgh Steelers last week against Chicago. But in this game, I thought it was one of his worst performances. And then in terms of what went wrong for the Steelers offense, I think, if I can use a Mike Tomlin term here, it was kind of popcorn, right? It was, there's an issue here with one player, then on the next play it was a different thing. And, we're going to go over some, kind of core themes here, but it just seemed like every single play was something different for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Somebody wasn't executing their job, and the fact that it's not something super identifiable and it's kind of like the entire group not executing all simultaneously is really concerning, especially this late into the NFL season. But we'll start here by pointing some blame at the quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, who is just simply, it wasn't even just not good enough in this game, guys. He hasn't been good enough really over the last month and a half, all right? Now, in the first 6 games of the year, the first 7 weeks, all right, he was playing at a pretty darn good level. You can make an argument a top 10 level among NFL quarterbacks. He started the season off pretty darn well. Of course, he had that great game in Week 7 on Thursday Night Football against the Bengals to kind of catapult his numbers up into that top 10 range, or for most of those categories anyway. But then since the Green Bay Packer game, he has been one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the National Football League. His accuracy has completely gone out the window, going from 8th in completion percentage over expected to 33rd over this span of time. Every single one of these, it is a drastic downfall for Mr. Mr. Aaron Rodgers, and it's embarrassing, all right? At this point, Aaron Rodgers looks like a shell of himself and frankly looks like a shell of the quarterback that we saw in the first 7 weeks of the season. And really the big problem, guys, is that the Pittsburgh Steelers under Aaron Rodgers, and the problem doesn't go away with Mason Rudolph, by the way, this offense just as a whole can't throw the ball down the field, all right? Like when it comes to throwing it 10-plus yards down the field and then especially 20-plus yards down the field, throwing the ball deep down the field, they just can't do it. Over the last 36 days, guys, that's over a month now, the Pittsburgh Steelers have not completed a downfield pass. That's right. They are 0 for 13 over the last month plus, and they have thrown 3 interceptions throwing the ball deep down the field on passes of 20-plus air yards. That is absolutely an embarrassing stat there, but it's not surprising to anybody that's watched the Pittsburgh Steelers play offense over the last several weeks. And guys, I wish I could sit here and tell you that it's going to get better. I wish I could sit here and tell you Aaron Rodgers is going to turn things around at the end of this season. And listen, man, if he does, this team could be back in business. But until further notice, man, until I see it on the field, I can't sit up here and tell you that you should be able to expect Aaron Rodgers to play the way that he played earlier on in the season. He's dealing with a fractured wrist. He's got to play with that cast probably for the rest of this season. All right, I don't know what happened pregame when he jammed his finger on his throwing hand, pregame versus the Colts, but obviously everything after that has been drastically worse since that's happened, and I don't know how bad that particular injury is either. So I really wish I could sit here and tell you Aaron Rodgers is going to turn things around and play a lot better down the stretch. I really hope he does, but at this point, I can't say that is even close to a certainty at this point in time. Now, it wasn't just Rodgers, though, guys. I will say that. There was also no separation from the wide receivers. There's a number of instances, including on the strip sack, fumble 6 there. To start the second half where nobody was open, all right? Like Arthur Smith sends out a couple of different receivers out there. A lot of times they were like in 12 and 13 personnel, and you've got like 3 receivers going out for like actual routes. 2 of them are tight ends, and one of them's Jonnu Smith, so you can just take away that guy. Then the other guy's like Darnell Washington or something. He's not going to get a ton of separation, and then they can just double-team DK Metcalf. Like there's just not a whole lot of separation from this offense whatsoever in terms of the pass catchers. And then even when they did go to 11 personnel, like Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin III, those guys were not getting consistent separation either, all right? So when Rodgers sits up there in the postgame press conference and says, oh yeah, there wasn't a lot of separation from the receivers, I give credit to Buffalo in their coverage. They did a pretty decent job, but the lack of wide receiver talent, specifically in the route running and separation areas in this wide receiver room, really showed up this week, and it really limited the amount of options Rodgers had at his disposal. And speaking of poor pass catchers on this team, Jonnu Smith, once again, killed this offense. I mean, he is the Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson type of offensive player for the Steelers offense this year. I know Jonnu's a tight end, and those other 2 players were wide receivers, but Jonnu is the guy that they brought in that was going to be that solution at, the number 2 pass catcher this year was kind of their vision for him, and they play him like that. He gets a full-time starter's workload in this offense still. He gets more reps than Calvin Austin III, Roman Wilson, and Pat Freiermuth, even though all 3 of those players are more efficient receivers than Jonnu Smith is, and frankly, I think Roman and Freiermuth are better blockers than Jonnu Smith is at this point in time in Jonnu's career. But yet, Arthur Smith loves Jonnu Smith and thinks he's the second coming of Jesus Christ or something. So he's getting all these snaps because who knows why. But it seems like Aaron Rodgers is starting to get a little bit frustrated with Jonnu as well, because apparently Jonnu ran the wrong route when Rodgers tried to throw the ball in the middle of the end zone yesterday on the final offensive drive before garbage time. You guys can remember Rodgers threw it in the middle of the field to nobody because Jonnu was supposed to run an in-breaker and not an out-breaker. This is what Rodgers had to say post-game. When there's film sessions, everyone shows up. And when I check to a route, you do the right route. Jonnu and I just weren't on the same page. I checked to an in-breaker, and he ran an out-breaker. Jonnu's a true professional, so I'm sure he's sick about that. So, obviously, I think Rodgers might be starting to see what I see here on the Steelers film, and maybe he will advocate to Arthur Smith, oh, man, we just can't have Jonnu Smith out there as much as we have him out there. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't identify these checks. He's terrible as a blocker as well. He had a number of blocking miscues in this football game. guys have been saying it for weeks, and, Arthur Smith hasn't listened to me, but, I'm just a guy on YouTube. But, I mean, week in and week out, we see Jonnu Smith not playing good football, and it just begs the question, are they ever going to figure this out and get Jonnu Smith off the field? But then, going in the same vein here of using Jonnu in the wrong way, on that final 4th and 2 play before, the Steelers turned it over on downs, I mean, it was one of the worst coordinated plays I've seen from the Steelers this entire season. You guys can take a look here at the still image that we have from the play pre-snap. This is the pre-snap alignment. Just look at this. You got the 2 300-plus pounders on the outside of the worst blocking tight end in football right here. And guess who they're asking him to block right here? It's not one of these two guys, one of these DBs. No, they're asking him to guard Greg Rousseau, all right, and he's got outside leverage. How the hell is Jonnu Smith supposed to prevent Rousseau from blowing this play up? This is absolute coaching malpractice, personnel mismanagement, and, this is all on Arthur Smith and the fact that, Aaron Rodgers was like, oh, yeah, let's get into this formation. Let's call this play. Well, I'm cool with this play. Like, no, this is just absolute red flags. No, no, no. You do not do this play. Jonnu Smith has to be on the outside of Spencer Anderson and Darnell Washington on any play that he is on the field. Instead, you're asking him to, block Greg Rousseau with this terrible leverage, and we act surprised when the game is over and we get a negative 2-yard gain, on a 4th and 2 with the game on the line. Absolute coaching malpractice from Arthur Smith and just absolute lunacy from the Steelers coaching staff. But then when it comes to the run game, it wasn't like the run game was great either. Obviously the passing game couldn't do much, but neither could the run game. And I think what a lot of it comes down to is the Steelers lost the line of scrimmage pretty consistently. I thought the defensive line of the Bills did a really good job. I think that they were really, really well disciplined in this football game, all right? Like, we've seen this Bills defense not play particularly well against the run. That was different this week, all right? They looked a lot more disciplined to me. They were filling their gaps. They were holding the line of scrimmage pretty darn well. So the Steelers, unfortunately, were not able to enforce their will in the run game like they did against Chicago 2 weeks ago. Now, in terms of some individual performances on the offensive line, I thought Peat held up fine at left tackle, particularly in pass blocking. Now, he could have been better in run blocking, but he's a backup offensive lineman. There's only so much you can ask your backup left tackle to do there. But Isaac Seumalo at left guard is playing really great football, guys. In fact, he's playing so well here over the last about month or so. He's going to make it a really tough decision for the Steelers to, potentially let him go in free agency, because somebody's going to pay him a lot of money if the Steelers let him go. He's playing that good. He's arguably been, the best offensive lineman for the Steelers over the last several weeks. So he's still playing at a high level. It's going to be interesting to see how he plays the rest of this year and whether or not the Steelers bring him back. Then the final offensive film takeaway here today is that should the Steelers spread things out more? I think it's a fair question, because there was more than one really nice run, specifically to Jaylen Warren. When they spread things out, they let players go out in, trips formations, and it was only kind of like the 5 offensive linemen on the line, and it created more space for Jaylen Warren to run through. Sometimes when you run all these 12 and 13 personnel packages and these jumbo packages, you've got all these bodies in the middle of the line of scrimmage. There's not a lot of space for the running back to work. But if you kind of spread things out, it puts less bodies in the box. It allows your offensive linemen to win one-on-one matchups, and then it gives your running back more space to work up the middle. I think if you go to your jumbo packages, that's actually when you should be running outside the tackles, not inside the tackles, because you can take advantage of the size advantage on the perimeter with guys like Darnell Washington and Spencer Anderson. And then if they want to run inside, if they want to run power, if they want to run that stuff in between the tackles, I would actually recommend Arthur Smith spread things out. And honestly, spreading things out might be good for Rodgers as well, because if you spread things out, defenses have to really declare what they're doing defensively from a defensive schematics perspective there, and Rodgers can use his brain to decipher what the defense is in pre-snap. If you have all these condensed formations, it's tougher for the quarterback to do that pre-snap. But now we can move on to the defensive side of the ball here, guys, and obviously it was a terrible performance. We'll start with the run defense, because this is really where the Steelers were terrible. It was just plain and simply soft, all right? People not getting off of blocks, people getting blasted off the line of scrimmage. I mean, TJ Watt got dominated in this game by a rookie rookie tight end. I'm not even joking, in the run game consistently. One-on-one, not even getting double teamed, just a one-on-one with a rookie tight end. And TJ Watt couldn't handle him the entire football game. That is embarrassing. We'll talk about TJ Watt later in this game. But, you couldn't stop a very specific wing formation that the Bills just spammed in this football game. I mean, they lined up in the same formation, the same wing formation, with one receiver out wide and then a bunch of guys out to the right tight to the offensive line consistently. I mean, we have a picture of the formation here, and they ran something very similar to this formation and ran the football 31 times in this football game. Absolute embarrassment. And if you're wondering how they did in this formation, if they're running it 31 times, it must have really been working. You would be right about that. They got 189 yards on that one formation alone and averaged over 6 yards a carry. And they just spammed duo and they spammed zone weak. And essentially what happened was the Steelers defensive linemen and linebackers would all crash extremely hard to the interior, and that would open up cutback lanes to the outside for James Cook, who is an excellent perimeter runner, and a lot of times Joey Porter Jr. is out of position as well. We'll get to Joey later here, but Pittsburgh knew what they were going to do, and they were going to get into that alignment, and they just couldn't stop it all day long. No matter what they tried, no matter what adjustments they tried, Terrell Austin couldn't figure out the jigsaw puzzle, and it led to a historically bad performance for the Steelers' run defense at Acrisure Stadium yesterday afternoon. This is what TJ Watt had to say about it post-game. He says, "I've never seen a team run the same play as much as they ran it tonight and have as much success as they had. I mean, I'm out of words for it." So if, TJ Watt, I will talk about TJ and his contribution to that, but, it really does point to a lack of coaching and a lack of finding the right answers and, adjustments to be able to stop it. But you also have to look at the players too. I mean, when you watch the film, players are not playing disciplined on film. They're missing tackles. They're out of alignment. They're doing exactly what the Buffalo Bills expect them to do. And, that's exactly why they kept running that play, because they just didn't adjust properly to that. Now, talking about some individual performances here, we'll start in the middle of the defense. And, Keanu Benton, I think, has been miscast by this Pittsburgh Steelers coaching staff for many years now. They drafted him to be their nose tackle in the middle of this 3-4 scheme. Thing is, he's not strong enough in the middle of this defense. He doesn't play with good enough pad level either to play nose tackle, all right? He gets double teamed. He gets blown off the spot really consistently. It consistently moves the line of scrimmage. And if teams want to run, in between the tackles on the Pittsburgh Steelers, they can pretty easily do it if Keanu Benton is playing at that nose tackle, or that one technique in the middle of the Steelers defensive line. And the thing is, I think Keanu's a really good player, man. I think as a penetrative type of player, a 3 technique, a 5 technique, somebody that's not in the middle taking on those double teams, he is a really freaking good player. And he's had some really, really good weeks during this season, all right, when he's been allowed to be that penetrative type of player. But, they moved him back to nose tackle this week really consistently with Derek Harmon out of the lineup, and you guys saw the result. It was the same old for the Steelers run defense when Derek Harmon is not out there. And then the guy that replaced Derek Harmon in the starting lineup playing defensive end, who really, I think, should be playing nose tackle instead of Keanu Benton, is the massive Y.A. Black. And now Y.A. had a really good first half, all right? You could tell he came out hot. He had a great motor. He was out there doing some great stuff, played with great pad level. He was getting off of blocks. He was maybe the best run defender on the Steelers in the first half. Then in the second half, he lost a lot of that juice. He lost his pad level. He got blown off the spot a number of times. You could tell he got tired, and with the lack of depth at defensive tackle, that really ended up being a big difference in why the Bills were able to just go on these long drives to finish this football game, is because Benton got blown off the spot and Y.A. was getting blown off the spot, creating these giant gaps. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen them on social media, these giant gaps in the middle of the Steelers run defense, wide open for the Bills running backs to exploit. It's because the interior was not sound for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And because of that, we need Derek Harmon to get back. It really sucks to depend on a rookie as much as the Steelers do on the interior of the defensive line. But Daniel Ekuale, maybe the best true nose tackle on this team, is out for the season. And you got to have Harmon back to get some balance back in this Steelers run defense, because when he's not on the field, man, this is the worst run defense in the league, plain and simply. Without Derek Harmon this year, you have given up 182 rush yards to the Jets, 117 rush yards to Seattle, and 249 rush yards to the Buffalo Bills. If you guys are wondering, that is 4.6 yards per carry in those 3 games. That would rank 25th among defenses in the National Football League if it were for the entire season. And then in terms of yards per game, they would rank dead last in the league by over 25 yards, 182.6 rush yards per game allowed when Derek Harmon does not play. So, I mean, I don't know what the extent of this knee injury is for Harmon. I'm hoping it's not a long-term injury, though, because as long as he's off the field, this Steelers defense, and specifically this run defense, is going to continue to not play well. Now we get to TJ Watt. All right, and I'm a huge TJ Watt fan, guys. I think he's one of the main reasons why this team has been able to maintain, being competitive and winning as many games as they do despite the offenses that they've had playing as poorly as they've played. All right, it's because of all the turnover production that he's had, all the sack production that he's had. He has been the most impactful defensive player in football over, the last maybe last 7 years or so, okay, let's call it. But he only had 1 pressure yesterday versus the Buffalo Bills. Now, I know Josh Allen didn't throw it all that much, and when he did, he got the ball out pretty quickly. And I thought Watt had some moments of really good play, just like he has in every game this year, but he consistently got one-on-one by a rookie tight end. All right, for the Buffalo Bills, and he got, dominated by him. And that's just not something that a $41 million per year edge rusher should do ever. I mean, if Micah Parsons went up against that rookie tight end, he would have destroyed him. Same thing goes for Myles Garrett. All right, I think TJ Watt, now that he's getting to this particular point in his career where he's getting older, he's just not the same athlete that he once was, and it's affecting the level of impact he can have on the field. He's still a good football player, but if you're going to pay a defensive player, a defensive end, more money than Matthew Stafford per year, more money than Sam Darnold per year, more money than Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield per year, all right? If you're going to pay a defensive player that much money, they have to give you Myles Garrett level of impact. They have to give you, Micah Parsons level of impact. And TJ Watt just doesn't do that, unfortunately, at this point in his career. Good, great job on that Buffalo Bills rookie tight end. I thought he had a great game. He played with really good technique, and, Watt, was the person that paid the price for that. But you pay a guy $41 million to be that impactful player and to be that absolute game wrecker. And although Watt is still a very good football player, he is not that kind of talent anymore. And the Steelers, unfortunately, are really stuck with his contract at this point in time, which sucks. But then we get to Joey Porter Jr., who is a big reason why those cutback lanes were there. Joey did a really bad job keeping contain on the outside for those cutback lanes. And if he would have been more aggressive and knew they were coming, he would have done a pretty decent job stopping some of those, 19 and 16 and 17-yard chunks that James Cook was consistently getting on the perimeter. It just wasn't a good game in run defense from Joey Porter Jr. I think in coverage, he has been really good over the last probably 2 months or so since he's come back from his injury. He's one of the better, pure man corners in the league, in my opinion, but he needs to be better as a run defender, and I'm guessing we're going to see zone weak quite a bit from the Baltimore Ravens this week once they turn on this film. But then Patrick Queen, of course, left this game in the first half after the 2-minute warning with an injury, and that forced Peyton Wilson, who has not called defensive plays all season, to do it the rest of the game. And you could see some miscommunications pop up the rest of the game, people looking confused because probably Peyton Wilson is not doing a good enough job relaying the calls to the defense. And Patrick Queen certainly has his issues. He leads the NFL in missed tackle rate among linebackers this year. He's had some deficiencies in pass coverage as well. PQ's not a perfect player, but losing that main source of communication in your defense is never a good thing. And you could definitely feel that in the second half with this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. But, shifting gears here to the passing defense, I actually thought it was pretty okay all day long. They had some nice zone pressures that they ran, some good stuff there, some fire zones, and Josh Allen honestly didn't have that great of a day. They did put pressure on him. I think his pressure rate was over 25%. When he wasn't getting the ball out super fast, the Steelers pass rush was there. He ran the ball pretty decently in this game at times, but overall in the passing game, I thought the coverage on the back end was actually pretty decent in this football game. So if you're looking for a positive there, that's probably what I would give you guys. And then another positive that I'd give you guys is someone in particular in the secondary that I thought had a good day, and that was Brandon Echols in the slot. Not only did he have that interception early in the game, but he had another PBU. He was very solid in coverage all game long. So if you're looking for somebody to give a little gold star to in this game, I'd probably give it to Brandon Echols. Now, before I go here, I know this has already been kind of a longer video here, but I do have some injury updates to give you guys that we've gotten over the last 48 hours or so. We'll start with Patrick Queen, who, of course, left the game yesterday with a now known as a back bruise. It's not considered a long-term injury, so we'll see what Mike Tomlin says on Tomlin Tuesday regarding that. But if he doesn't play, I think a full week of Peyton Wilson getting those reps with the green dot, I think would do him a lot of good and getting him prepared for that role in a really big divisional matchup versus the Baltimore Ravens. But also Deshaun Elliott, we learned, is still on crutches, and it sounds like he's going to be out for the rest of the season. Maybe if the Steelers go on like a deep playoff run, maybe we could think about him coming back for, AFC Championship games, Super Bowl kind of discussions. But, I mean, let's face it, right now, unless the Steelers make drastic changes, they're not even going to sniff that conversation. So Deshaun Elliott likely going to be out the rest of the year. That sucks. And then Broderick Jones is going to be out for the rest of the year, according to Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's Jerry Dulac, with a neck injury. Apparently the neck injury is worse than originally thought. He's going to have to miss the rest of the season. And, a big question with that now is, should the Pittsburgh Steelers pick up Broderick Jones's fifth-year option? And I can understand arguments for both. Broderick's gotten better. He's still a young player. And obviously it's a premium position. Maybe you don't want to spend another premium draft asset to address this position in the future years. And, he was playing, the best year of his career. So the upward trajectory, I can see why some people would want to pick up that fifth-year option. But for somebody coming off a serious neck injury, and somebody that frankly hasn't played great and has been the weakest link on this offensive line for 3 years now, to pick up a fifth-year option worth $20 million is what it's projected to be in 2027. I just don't think, that kind of cap hit and that kind of dollar figure is something that I would be willing to commit to at this point based on what we've seen from Broderick Jones at this stage of his NFL career. I would still probably go into next year as this team's starting left tackle and give him another chance to be this team's long-term option at the position. If he plays really well and he earns, a long-term contract, great. Give him that contract and keep him long-term. But, to make that commitment at this stage, I think would be premature. And I think we've seen, with the Steelers dishing out some of these big contracts to players that have disappointed this season, cough, cough, TJ Watt and DK Metcalf. I don't know if they want to dish out a $20 million cap hit in 2027 and commit to that for a guy like Broderick Jones at this stage. So be the GM for me down there at the comment section. What would you do? I would personally decline the fifth-year option, but when it comes to Broderick, would you accept it or decline it? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. And that will conclude today's edition of Steelers News and Rumors. Thank you guys so much for joining me here today. Tomorrow, we might have our preview in the morning. I'm still deciding what segment we want to put out in the morning, but then we'll have our first live show of Ravens Week. It's going to be a really fun week here on Steelers Talk, guys. So make sure you join us tomorrow for Steelers Talk Live starting at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Really do appreciate all of your guys' support. Until tomorrow, guys, here we go, Steelers.